André Brisson is known as the impulsive thinker. He's a professional engineer, entrepreneur, and advocate. André has built 3 successful companies, including Objective Engineering, an engineering firm specializing in niche markets. Later in life, André was diagnosed with severe ADHD and autism spectrum disorder, Asperger's syndrome. He credits that diagnosis as both a challenge and a strength in his journey. André helps fellow ADHD entrepreneurs embrace their unique talents and leverage their symptoms to achieve lasting success. His podcast and platform provide frameworks for self-advocacy and growth and are inspired by his own journey. The ADHD Transformation Journey Program, based on systems André developed to overcome his undiagnosed ADHD symptoms, has attracted global attention for its practical and candid approach. André, welcome to the next level.
Well, thanks, Ryan, for having me. It's a pleasure. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. And so excited for our conversation because I think that even if, our entrepreneurs who are listening don't necessarily directly have an ADHD diagnosis, I think the incidence of ADHD, ADD among entrepreneurs has to be higher than in the broader population. And I don't know if you've seen any research to that effect, but I'm sure there are countless undiagnosed. So if you know the answer to that, I'd love to learn. And then what was the tipping point to you getting that diagnosis later in life?
There's a higher propensity of an entrepreneur having ADHD or having an ADHD brain. Like I like to say it, it's not a disease or a disorder. It's just a different brain wiring. And I would say a lot of them become entrepreneurs because they're actually creating an environment that they can themselves be accepted in and not have to fight to be in, which is part of my story and the reason I got into entrepreneurship. But I do have the disease of entrepreneurship as well. So I am an entrepreneur mind. And I do think those are 2 separate things. But what was the second part of the question, Ryan?
Yeah. So you had this diagnosis later in life.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so curious, like what led to you finally going and getting that diagnosis?
I was in a life tempest. I had like 3 perfect life storms occurring at once, business side, personal side, and then my emotional regulation was absolutely negative. And, and a lot of my childhood trauma came up to be at the same time. So, and I'm very open and honest about this, Ryan, is like at one point, I wasn't pleasant to be around. It's just nothing was going well, losing the business, not feeling respected by family, everything. And I just remember screaming at my kids for absolutely no reason. And my brain going, buddy, you're overreacting here. Settle down. And then my emotional brain going, screw you. I'm still going. I had to release. And unfortunately, it was my kids. But the looks they gave me reminded me of another kid with 2 brothers and sisters with the same look. And I'm like, oh, crap. I am someone I don't want to be. So I went and got professional help. So then I got a referral to a psychiatrist. And ADHD was on my radar for about 10 years, but I never believed it. And we started talking about borderline personality disorder. So I had a lot of tendencies of a borderline personality disorder. And then throughout, I decided I got to take care of my mental health and get the professional help. And it turned out it was 4 letters, ADHD. And it came out, and then clarity and understanding pursued afterwards.
Can you tell me a little bit about just broadly, how your life, both personally and professionally, has been pre versus post diagnosis? Because I think if other people recognize some of their story in your story, maybe your experience could help paint a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel.
The biggest challenge for me was, ADHD, the unfortunate thing is to be diagnosed, you got to be down and out. You just can't be having a good time and things are going well and then being diagnosed. So something has to happen that's getting in the way. So for me was my emotional regulation. And then the other thing too, I was noticing there was just something not right. And then it's getting better now over the last 4 or 5 years, but successful people we're not supposed to have ADHD. That was the common knowledge. That was the assumption. And I was told, no, you're too successful. You did well in school. You don't have ADHD. But I kind of turned it silent suffering. Because of the ADHD, I'm trying to fit into a system that's not wired for me or doesn't respect the wiring of my brain. I'm trying to stay on top of things a lot more, and I'm doing it in secret and hiding. So, I'm doing very well. I'm very successful, but there's always that one thing that was missing I just knew would connect all the dots. Or like I'd say, my bridge, it was just that last puzzle piece to make it into a more stable bridge. And I knew I was on a fine edge. I just couldn't do things like, I've been reading self-help books my whole life, and I didn't realize at the time, actually with work with therapy, was I was reading those books to find out what was wrong with me, Ryan, so I can get better in other people's eyes.
Yeah.
So trying to fit into that mold, and it wasn't working. So with all the self-help and success, something was still off. I'm very successful. I got a big team. I'm making good money, but why is it something's not right and I'm not achieving what others are achieving or how I'm supposed to achieve it? And, forgetting things, go. I purposely kept my schedule extremely tight and busy. So it was always urgent. Everything was urgent. And I didn't realize at the time that was my brain's defense mechanism or mechanism to make things interesting for me to stay on top of things. Because ADHD is an interest-based nervous system, not an importance-based interest system. So for the majority of people, if it's important to you or important to your boss or important to your family, you can find the motivation to get it done. You may not like it, not enjoy it, but you've got motivation to do it. But the ADHD brain needs it to be interesting, challenging, novel, urgent, or passion related. Then the brain will start to kick in and be motivated. And if we lose any of those, then it gets harder to get into it. So it's almost as if we are focusing to focus. And a lot of time that gets misunderstood as you don't care. You're just lazy. That's why a lot of times the stuff I don't enjoy doing, I leave it to the last minute. So my brain goes, you need to get it done. So it'll fire it up. It's not fun, but at least the brain's kicking in to get the motivation to get it done. And that's why if it's interesting, I go there. I lose interest there, I go there because it's interesting or challenging. And then people saying that's inattention. You're not focusing, not paying attention. But I got too much attention, right? We're scanners. So the other analogy I really like about the ADHD brain is we're hunters in a farming world. So in the old days, you wanted an ADHD brain to protect the family, the tribe, the village, because every twitch of grass we would react to see if it was a threat or not. But today, every time we react to a little twitch, we're not paying attention. But, you want us in intense situations because you really don't want to sit there and think, twitch of grass, hey, study shows there's a 25% chance it's a lion. It could be nothing. It could be a rabbit. Oh, no, the lion's already come down and ate 4 or 5 of us. So that's where the impulsivity thing is misunderstood is twitch, react. Sometimes you don't want to think too much before react. But there's a fine line. Every strength can be a weakness, right? Like you, Ryan, and Steve, like we're from the strategic coach family. Strengths, we understand our talents and all that, but I've always said strengths can become your weaknesses. And like Clifton's strength says, an overutilized or underutilized strength can be a weakness. So yes, the impulsivity and quote unquote inattentiveness can be strengths when required and weakness when overutilized or underutilized. And for me, when I got the diagnosis, I sat down and says, there was a negative stigma. I fought it for a bit because still a negative stigma about it. Going, oh my God, my life is over. I got ADHD, therefore I'm a loser. And start reading into it and start realizing, wait a minute, every time I had great success in my companies was because of my ADHD. The biggest headaches and hurdles and downfalls was because of my undiagnosed ADHD. So what was the difference? And that's where I realized when the symptoms, quote, I don't like calling them symptoms, or the differences were managed, I was doing very well. And when they weren't managed, that's when we had the problems. So then I started looking at it that way and start looking back and see, I created a lot of systems unknowingly to overcome the symptoms. Like there's a few big ones, if you don't mind me sharing, Ryan.
Please
The
do.
big
Yeah.
ones, the ones that really hit me the most was we have an executive functioning difference. Okay. So executive functions, you setting goals, achieving the goals, planning, executing. So working memory is a big one. How much stuff can you hold in your head without having to write it down? The majority of people is 7 to 10. That's why phone numbers are 7 to 10 digits. It's easy to remember. ADHD brains is actually 3 to 5. And honestly, I'm probably 2 to 3. So that's why I just started writing everything down. I was ashamed of it for a while because you're supposed to remember everything. But I just started writing down so I wouldn't remember. Because if not, I'd have to run it in my head all the time. Then I can't listen to you, Ryan, if you're talking to me, because I'm running this in my head while my brain's taking in everything at the same time. So that was a big one for me. The second one is our prefrontal cortex. That's the filter, the in and out filter. So I forget what number it is. Our brain takes in a lot of information every day, and the brain filters out, what was it, 7/8 of it? That just means your brain's going, not important, not important, who cares, who cares? That one we want to pay attention to, that one not so. But the ADHD brain takes the majority in. And then we have to almost cognitively process all that information and weed it out. That's why we get easily overwhelmed. Noisy in places, too much going on at once. Busy cities is tough because there's so many sounds, noises. It's coming in. Our brain's taking it all in raw, and we have to process it still. The third one was time blindness. We're blind to time. Everyone has a time horizon, which is how far in the future can you still see and feel time to plan? I'm a week. If you say, Ryan, we're going to meet, how about we meet up in 3 weeks? Let's schedule something. No problem. Let's do it. That's like 100 years for me. It doesn't matter. So far down the road in my head that I'll agree to anything. Hey, by the way, we got a big project coming up. I need it in 4 months. I'm going to forget it tomorrow because that's too far away. Now, when I get too close, a 4-month project, maybe that's 4 weeks worth of work. 2 weeks before, I might get a reminder, oh, crap, I got to do that project. Now I got to cram 4 weeks worth of work in 2. So the time horizon is different. So it's almost like a nearsightedness of the future. It's hard for us to see it and feel it. Even though we can envision the entrepreneur, visionary entrepreneur, ADHD entrepreneur, we can envision the future and live that. But it's hard for us to feel and see the future very ahead. So the time blindness is not that we, if we say let's meet, and then you're like, oh, there he goes again. He cancels because he forgot his schedule. Well, yeah, you know what? I don't look. That's why I got people to manage my schedule for me and to make sure I'm on track with smaller steps for projects. And then the brain just inhibits things differently. And that's a neurological thing. It's nothing you can do or do about it. It just inhibits differently. The impulsivity and the emotions we feel 100, 1,000 times more than the neurotypical. And these emotions are intense, raw, and immediate.
So you have this it's fascinating. You've got these systems you've developed over time to compensate, to the narrower sort of working memory, the in and out filter of the prefrontal cortex where you're having to process cognitively everything that comes in. So there are these situations of overwhelm, and then the time blindness you mentioned. All of that seems like, business, entrepreneurship, leading organizations, lots of information flow, lots of overwhelm and lots of noise, both literally and figuratively. And then also just the fact that, you're, a visionary. So we're setting these goals that are a quarter, a year, 10 years down the road in some cases. How have you been able to navigate entrepreneurism and leadership given these really, it feels like structural challenges that fly in the face of what conventionally you'd need to be successful?
The biggest thing is environment control. So if you control the environment, then you control of it all. So my office that I'm being interviewed right now, it's nothing but whiteboards and empty walls, no shelves. There's nothing in here to distract me. The only thing I have here on my desk is the stuff I need to do the project or the task at hand. When I'm done, it goes outside the office. So we separate environment controls one. So when I show up to work, my brain just knows you're in work mode. Done. I'm in here, you're in severe focus mode. I even got another area in the corner of the office where that's where I can be interrupted mode. So with all these different environment controls, it helps a lot. And the other thing too is I got my company set up to be ADHD safe. I got SOPs and processes outlined so that people are doing it regularly, that I don't need to be involved. And the big shift is actually just trying to focus and do the things that I do best. Remember the interest-based nervous system, passion, my unique ability, the stuff that gives me fire. And that's more helping the team coming up with unique solutions, not planning. I'm really good at creating a path with major milestones, and then everyone else will fill in the blanks there. And I got to stay out of it because I keep changing the path all the time. And that really helped is understanding where to stay in your lane and to try to keep things interesting, challenging, novel. I'm really working on the urgency. It's good to have the urgency, but that can have a negative repercussion or a positive. So if it's an urgency because it's a construction site problem, like I'm a structural engineering firm as well, that's okay. That's a fun one and it gets easily resolved. But if it's always urgent because I keep my schedule or everything's last minute, then it affects your mental health, your fatigue, and then your emotional regulation gets disrupted on that.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you have, in the top, your background, you've got multiple different companies. Do you have multiple different companies because that's one of the coping mechanisms for your ADHD as well? Or have you thought about that?
I have thought about it. It's interesting you mentioned it because I kind of came to a realization the last few weeks actually about it. I think it's part of the ADHD. It keeps it interesting, novel, because honestly, I'm really good at the engineering part. That it's very quick, and I don't want to do it all day. So I needed to fill in the gaps. So I started other stuff, and I really enjoy coaching and helping. Actually, I don't like the term coaching. I'm a guide, so I really like guiding people to their goals and get them to understand themselves uniquely and understand their natural talents and strengths, and you utilize them and to provide them with a vocabulary to advocate for themselves. So yeah, got the diagnosis, what I understand, started the coaching, the podcast, The Impulsive Thinker, to share because I'm a learner. I just love to learn. And as I learn, I love sharing it as well. But at the same time, it's a bit of the ADHD, but I'm also got a driven entrepreneurial high achiever brain, which means I need a few things on the go. And many people tell me that I got to stop or slow down or I'm never satisfied. But that's measuring against them or the society. And I'm like, you know what? I need to have many things on the go. If I don't have it, I'm actually bored. And that's when I get into trouble. So I'm trying to keep it more of before it was 100% work, multiple things. Now I'm trying to balance between self-care and personal stuff. So yeah, I need a balance, but there's a such thing as too much, but there's not enough as a little. But I'm no longer ashamed to say I want these things because I'm just naturally love problem solving, and it requires me to be in multiple pools because it just keeps me active intellectually and setting up goals. And setting up goals, and we're supposed to celebrate and have a big party. We got it. Cool. Who cares? I got to set another one because to me, it's the journey. It's never achieving it. And that's when people start saying, hey, you're never satisfied. And it's just something can always be better. But the thing is, the difference between what I'm describing to you and other entrepreneurs, non-ADHD entrepreneurs, I'm no longer ashamed to say this. Since our brain doesn't stop and it runs fast all the time, the stuff I do is fast. I'm running. What I think is I'm walking, everyone thinks I'm sprinting. And I'm no longer ashamed of that or make excuses. It's just the way it is. Yeah. I need multiple things, but that's the way I enjoy that.
So, I totally relate to that sort of line of thinking. You mentioned that you got this diagnosis later, and the way you frame it is that you were already successful, you were already running businesses, right? There were elements that you didn't like about how you were showing up, right? You used the example of how you were interacting with your children, but did you worry that pursuing a diagnosis and then knowing that there was a diagnosis would lead to different options in terms of some sort of management or treatment or what have you? Were you afraid that you were going to lose some of the edge or some of what made you unique to be successful?
At first, yes, with the medication. I did that for a little bit. For me, medication, the side effects were definitely was more of a hindrance than the benefits I gained from it. But yet, at the same time, the systems that I do have mitigate those. And again, that's just so we can fit in and normalize ourselves with how everyone else is doing. And I just fight that. But yeah, I had a fear that I was going to lose my edge, my creativity. But once I start learning and understanding, because a lot of this too, and I think the ADHD entrepreneur has to realize it's not only the ADHD that was the problem. It was my mental health. There was a lot of childhood trauma shit that came out. Pardon me, sorry. There's a lot of childhood trauma that came about. That was part of the life tempest. It just came out. Little Andre just had enough. It just protected me. So there's a lot of different avenues that, let's say ADHD is trauma. No, a lot of ADHD people had trauma, but it's not like because you have ADHD, you had trauma automatically. But it's all that. And once you get a control of your mental health and your understanding and the self-respect, I went to get help to see how screwed up I was. And when I got the ADHD diagnosis, Ryan, actually, I fought because I actually wanted it to be borderline personality disorder because I could now understand why I was such an a-hole. And I believed I was an a-hole. So if I was ADHD, then I'm not an a-hole, but I've been living my life believing I was an a-hole to the point where I believed it and it was my character. So,
Right.
that was a tough shift to, it's been 6 years now, or longer. I forget how old I am. But it's 5-6 years now going from hating myself to actually respecting myself. And that's the actual growth and transition. And that gives you more mental space, more mental energy, and you actually have more time and freedom to be creative. And if anything, my creativity and has flourished. It's growing. I don't think I haven't peaked yet, right? It's growing because of that. So a lot of people are afraid that it's going to hinder their creativity or whatnot, but that's your old self. You're going to discover a new self and you're going to grow. As long as you got a growth mindset and not a victim mindset, you can, there's only one way to go is flourish.
Yeah. And you painted a really colorful picture, and you mentioned strategic coach. We both, are in the strategic coach universe together. And one of the recurring themes, one of the big topics that constantly comes up in coach is confidence, and how confidence, can positively or adversely affect your performance, how you show up, the kind of leader you are, the kind of vision you have for the future. Can you just tell me a little bit about how your confidence has changed using this maybe diagnosis as an inflection point, who you were before versus who you're, working on now?
Yeah, you're right. It is about confidence. But the confidence I had before was cockiness. So I think I had a false sense of confidence to overcome a lot of the self-belief, core beliefs. Like I always knew and know that I can achieve whatever I wanted, but I never believed I can do it, even though I did it. But now I do have more self-confidence because I actually have a different relationship with myself. So it's a different type of confidence, which actually allows me to create better barriers and boundaries with other people and companies. Well, before I really didn't have any. People would trample over you, take advantage of me. But now, since I got more self-respect for myself, I'm getting closer to self-love. That's a big one. I'm going to admit to everyone, it doesn't happen overnight, and it's a lot better than it was. But when you get that self-confidence and respect, you can start seeing where boundaries are respectable. It is about me. And if people are having issues with the boundaries that you set, then the issue is with them, not you. And that was the biggest insight I got over the last few years. If people understand your boundary and respect you and love you, they're going to get it. Or even if they don't get it, they're going to respect it. And those are the ones you want to be around.
For sure. One of the things that I know you said has contributed to your success is a mentality of just do it, right? Which in theory sounds great. And I think, a lot of people would recognize the value of those three simple words, just do it. But for somebody who, needs that urgency and needs that intensity to bring them their full self to it, how do you just do it? Have there been times where you struggle to just do it, even when you logically know you need to get started on something to just do it, but you can't get there?
Many times, and usually what that happens is I make it urgent, last minute, or what I'm starting to do is chunk it down, get my admin staff to start chunking it down. Like, hey, there's a 4-month project coming up. Oh my God, that's so long. So they'll chunk it down. So in the next 2 weeks, I got to do a part. It could be one way. And, but it is challenging, but at the same time is, again, the environment. It's the one thing with all this is I've gotten a lot of self-awareness about the ADHD, how my ADHD is different than others and how mine is. And that self-awareness, there's a lot of knowledge about it. A lot of people know about it. Even the people with ADHD, they know about it, but they're not doing the self-awareness part. And honestly, because the self-awareness to me is knowledge that's being applied. So, if it's working, if it's not working, how can it change? How can we make it better next time? And that's the key. But like I say to my team, okay, I'm about to do something I really don't care to do, but I need to do. So if you want to interrupt me, be forewarned, I'm going to be pissy and just wait a couple hours if you want. And it's just understanding what triggers you was the other big step for me. And I'm not just talking, everyone says, oh, that triggered you and there's the explosion. But the thing is, that's not what started the event. So let's look back to what triggered that trigger, what triggered that trigger, what triggered the trigger, to the point where I get back to like, this is happening. If I do something different now, can I say this? Or am I going to know in a day I'm going to explode? So by going back and start finding those early warning signs is a big thing for me. And then with that, I create more rules. Like I don't open my email first thing in the morning if I know I got to get something out important, right? Because usually that's when an email comes in from a certain triggering customer that'll derail you for the day. So I don't know if that helped the answer it or example, but.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And I know that you've given this a ton of thought, and that you have the ADHD, easy for me to say, ADHD transformation journey, that you've developed based on these systems and these learnings. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? If folks have, heard themselves in some of your experience share or want to learn more, what does that look like?
Well, the ADHD Transformation Journey Program is basically three courses. The first one is the ADHD Simplified. Very simple. There's no science. I would discuss a bit of the science and the theory, but in the end, there's 3 things you got to worry about to manage the symptoms. It's an executive functioning difference, you're time blind, and your brain inhibits differently. Manage those things, everything else will work out. You don't have to chase dopamine or whatnot. And then the next one is the ADHD structure. So based on the simplified model, create your structure, which is environment control, habits and routines, and personal rules. Then you got your structure. The ADHD brain thrives on structure, not systemized, like very tight systems, but a structure that we want to follow, because that becomes habit and routine, and we're not wasting mental energy. And then we roll it into you owning ADHD, and then we got to get we're there to help you grow as a person, understand your ADHD better, build your business, and then just get like-brained people together where we don't have to justify our symptoms, and where we all understand what's going on and learn from each other.
That's amazing. Andre, this has just been so fascinating, and I so deeply appreciate the generosity of the way that you've shared, and your transparency and your authenticity in bringing your story. Because I think that there are definitely people who are going to listen to this, and it will inspire them to take the next step in their journey from hearing from you. And I just picked up so much from it. I love the way you reframed it from a disease mindset to, really a deep dive into what the ADHD brain is, an urgent based system, not an important based system, thrives on structure that becomes habit and routine. And I love the way you walk through systems that help you compensate, compensate for the working memory challenges, the overwhelm from overstimulation, the compensation for time blindness, the environmental control that you're doing there in your office. I loved the distinction you made between confident and cockiness. I think that there's a ton of value in there for everybody to reflect on which C they are between those two. And then, just the chunking big things down into smaller, projects that give you urgency, that allows you to create that urgency, I think is a really helpful tactical thing. For folks who want to learn more and follow you, I know you're active in podcasts, newsletters, YouTube. What can folks do next?
You can find me on LinkedIn or my website at theimpulsivethinker.com. You can join up on the newsletter there, or sign up for the shit list. It's my weekly planning tool. And you can listen to the podcast called The Impulsive Thinker, and it's available everywhere, where we talk to ADHD entrepreneurs and discuss anything that interests me.
I'm for sure going to be subscribing. We'll include links in the show notes for everybody who's listening. And Andre, thank you again for sharing and for joining us on The Next Level.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate this. Thank you.